Check me out.
Okay. So. We got some interesting developments, everybody. We got coming out of the Federal Reserve from the FOMC, they have decided to not lower interest rates. If anybody thought that they were going to, surprise, surprise. Unfortunately for you, they are not. But more so, what is interesting to me is how how there are a lot of people uh, yammering on about how the Fed should lower rates because the economy is doing well. We just got good GDP numbers of 3%, even though there's a lot of things under the surface of that number that are not that good, right? So we got a lot of things developing from the Fed. And um, and we're going to talk about why um, the Fed and why the Fed chair and Trump are in a debacle right now over lowering rates, right? So the thing is, um, we have a lot of people anticipating, just really hoping that the Fed will lower rates because that's going to help stimulate consumers and that is going to help reinvigorate the housing markets and things like that. The only reason, and there's a lot of reasons, but the main reasons as to why that's just not true is because typically when you have a lowering of the federal funds rate, right, the overnight lending rate between banks set by the Federal Reserve, when you have a lowering of this, typically this is an indication that we are heading into not so great of times, right? And so why in the world would you want the Federal Reserve to lower rates, right? And so typically because in the people's minds, low rates is a good thing because that means stimulus and jobs are going to hire, and with higher rates, there is pressure on jobs and companies to not hire and people to not spend money because the cost of money is higher. The cost of debt, excuse me, is higher. And so this is why, one, the Fed is not going to lower rates, especially if we're having good signs within the economy. Why would the Fed lower rates, right? We're having decent GDP numbers and inflation is coming down, right? And so, of course, why would the Fed lower rates? Also, thing two is another reason why the Fed is not going to lower rates is because the inflation rate that the IMF is seeing, they are looking ahead. They are actually seeing inflation upticking. So this is what the Federal Reserve is anticipating as well, is an uptick in inflation, especially if they lower rates, then more than likely inflation is um, more likely to creep up, especially with tariffs, with Trump's tariffs, right? So we definitely do not want to get carried away with lowering interest rates too early, right? And so that is the thing. But when you hear these pundits talking about why we should lower rates, just understand that they don't really understand economics. Okay. So we have that going over into um, um, actually everything, right? And so we actually just went over everything, but a little bit more too, right? So we have what's called the neutral interest rate. And Jerome Powell actually brought this up in the recent Federal Reserve meeting where he kind of went over the consensus statement of the FOMC as well as when he was talking about them holding their rate, right? And so we have the what's referred to as the neutral interest rate, right, or calculated with as R star, right? We have this rate that is anticipated. All right, so we have what is called the neutral interest rate, It is the rate at which the economy or the Fed is neither um, accommodating nor restrictive. It is anticipated that the that the neutral interest rate is somewhere from the Federal Reserve. Um, it is anticipated that it is around 3%. And so the Fed is a percent and a quarter to a percent and a half above neutral, so they're moderately restrictive, right? That is the term that the Fed is using to describe the how the rate is um, in the economy, right? And so they're saying that they are very restrictive, and so this is the whole reason behind um, the Federal Reserve's goal, actually. And so um, they're not trying to give up the progress that they've made so far. They've made a lot of progress. They're just not going to tell everybody that actually they're seeing what they want to see. So, just to go over everything, so the Fed did not lower rates. They are not lowering because they anticipate inflation to go up for a few reasons, from the IMF projections to tariffs, and all of that good stuff. And so that brings us to um, people. So because they're not cutting, this is angering a lot of people. This is angering Trump. This is angering the right, and this is angering maybe everyday people who are feeling the pressure of their interest rates increasing the rate of their debt accumulation, right? And so they're thinking that the Federal Reserve dropping these rates is going to help, but there's this thing called lag time too that I forgot to bring up, right? And so doing this is not just going to cause an immediate effect anyway. It's going to take a good bit of time for this to go through the markets anyway and through the economy. So there's a thing called lag time, right? And so and so this brings us to um, the Fed chair and Trump beefing, right, about the Fed not lowering rates. Trump wants the rates to be at 1%, but that would not be good. That would undo all the Fed's progress, which is a part of the whole charade and everything like that anyway. And actually, because the Fed is closer to neutral, right, they are actually not as restrictive on the economy, right? And so there's the paradox, right? And so everybody's anticipating the Fed to lower. Everybody wanted them to lower this time around. They have no reason to. People are anticipating the Fed or wanting the Fed to lower in September. Probably won't have much reason to lower at that point either. And if they do have reason to lower, you probably won't like it. Like how it shows up in reality, right? And so, yeah. And so I just wanted to get this information out, precise and concise, so that you can understand and navigate what is being said and what you're hearing. All right. Stay young, stay pro-black. Peace. I'm young and I'm black and my hat's real low. You like